Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome. It's great to see such a nice crowd so early in the morning here. Thank you very much for being here. This Churchill Club program is called the Future High Performance Enterprise, and we are privileged to have with us 5 distinguished individuals to share their thoughts. And I'm going to start with Jonathan Becher, Chief Digital Officer, SAP, Bask Iyer, Chief Information Officer, VMware, Jody Mulkey, Chief Technology Officer, Ticketmaster, Joanne Molesky, ThoughtWorks, and Barry O'Reilly, our moderator, also from ThoughtWorks, who will moderate the conversation. Welcome, and thank you very much for being with us this morning. The genesis of this conversation is an important new book co-authored by Barry and Joanne, along with Jez Humble, called Lean Enterprise, How High-Performance Organizations Operate at Scale. And the intention of our discussion this morning is to share some of the hard-won insights from their work, as well as the insights of the other speakers. We would like to thank our partner and sponsor, ThoughtWorks, particularly Gary DiGregorio, Amit Kaul, and Deepti Shankar. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done this without you. With a few words about Churchill Club for our new guests in the audience. For the past nearly 30 years now, we have been convening audiences in the interest of encouraging innovation, economic growth, and social good. We attempt to keep one foot firmly planted in the future so that as we look at today's trends, we are also looking at their implications for opportunities tomorrow. And many good things have come out of these gatherings over the last 30 years. We always respectfully ask our speakers not to pitch, but rather to think of themselves as advancing collective understanding. If you tweet this morning, please use the hashtags Churchill Club and Lean Enterprise, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. And now, let's welcome our moderator, Barry O'Reilly. Barry.
Thank you very much. The pace of change we're now starting to experience, not only in technology change, but customer demand, is really having a profound effect on organizations. In some instances, it's causing them to go into cardiac arrest. The average life expectancy, should I say, of organizations from the S&P 500 in the 1960s was 67 years. Today, that's 18. It's cardiac arrest. What's causing these challenges? What's causing these companies to disappear? Now, we're really lucky today to have some real thought leaders and experienced people who are running some of these organizations, who are making those decisions on a day-to-day basis. What is going to create us more performance? What is going to keep our business relevant, not today, but tomorrow and the day after? Are we being disrupted? Or will be disruptee. Now, how we're going to spend the next morning while you enjoy your beautiful breakfast that's been laid on, we'll have about 50 minutes where we'll sort of explore and topic some key themes that are really important: culture, leadership, product development, diversity, all these things that are really important aspects to creating high-performant organizations. And we'll ask the panelists to give their insight, their real depth, knowledge, experience in these areas based on what they're seeing, not only today, but the implications as we look forward. Then at the end, we'll have a chance for people to ask questions. So I'd really encourage you, if you hear something interesting as we go around, scribble it down. Keep that question. Be provocative. Challenge these people. They're here. They enjoy it. They like to spar intellectually and debate, because that's where innovation comes from. We need that tension, that healthy tension, to move us forward. So without further ado, Jonathan.
Why do I go first?
Well, you're standing right beside me.
Okay, fair enough.
SAP is obviously a fairly complex and challenging organization. But when you're trying to drive change in an organization like that, what are some of the key things you look to do? What helps move things forward?
Yeah, so maybe I'll preface it by saying I spent most of my career at startups. Until I joined SAP about 7 years ago, I'd never worked at, quote-unquote, a large company. And the startup's job was to give those companies a heart attack. That was what we do. now inside of a 75,000 person, roughly 100 billion market cap. The observation I have here and of other large companies is essentially we have corporate immune systems. Kind of like your own human body immune system, corporate immune systems develop antibodies. When something foreign is injected into your body, then the antibodies come and try to contain that thing and stamp it out from spreading and changing your body. The same thing is the way corporations are built to survive. They don't want new because new is disruptive. And so if you try to introduce something suddenly into a corporate system, the antibodies come out. They're not coming out necessarily, I mean, the effect they have is to swallow the innovation and slow it from spreading, but they're trying to protect the company and make it successful. So the question on change is, you have two options, which is do something mass, which sort of takes over the body, and I will promise not to make too many more human metaphors for the rest of the day, and then sort of overwhelm, make so much change that the antibodies can't keep up, or I think what increasingly people are realizing is, in some sense, do it under the radar. Right. Do it in such a way that doesn't challenge status quo until it has a sense to set and grow and survive on its own.
Right. So Joanne, you're head of information security for ThoughtWorks. They're typically...
She probably doesn't like the antibody idea. So.
one of the departments that are typically, if you forgive me, associated with that type of antibody behavior. What are the kind of things that you do to mitigate that?
Well, from my own personal perspective, I think the worst thing that we do, and I come out of IT risk and compliance, is we only see how we can prevent people from doing things, and we don't think of things how we can help you do things better in a safe and secure manner. So I talk about negative space quite a bit when we talk about risk and compliance, and stop focusing on the things you see, start focusing on the things that aren't written down in the compliance regulations. Start looking at what's not there that needs to be put in place rather than keep focusing on everything that's there that needs to be removed. And I work from that way, and it's sort of like stop fighting stupid, start making awesome. That's Jesse Robbins, and that's the approach I like to take.
Ticketmaster, you're obviously a company trying to create loads of new products, build new things to market.
Sure, for us, I joined the company a couple of years ago, and the thing that I noticed, which was the biggest barrier to change immediately, was this pervasive learned helplessness, where folks that had joined the company had tried to innovate in a space, and I got blocked because I didn't have budget, or I got blocked because some person 7 levels up the chain said no, or they just kind of get blocked, and then they're in this very, very small box, and it's not that rewarding to keep banging your head against the wall, so they just stop. And the great ones don't stay, as it turns out. They'll go and beat their head on a wall where they can actually make some progress. So I see that learned helplessness as being a huge, huge barrier. So for what we found successful is to create the space for people to innovate and to fail. And so we have started the Epic Fail Award. And so, like, what did you learn? We had our selection committee last week, actually, and it was pretty amazing some of the things we learned, what not to do. And so just creating that space for people to learn and to explore is really, really key, because in a corporation, I too have never worked in a big corporation, and it's not okay to be wrong, I learned, which is not great for me because I'm wrong every day, and I think that changing that mindset where it's not failing, it's learning, is probably the biggest key in creating space for it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And in my last project, every time we had a concept of failure cake. So when everybody made a mistake, they'd have to go out, buy cake, come back to the office, and we'd all sit around and eat it and discuss why we had this problem and how we were going to mitigate it. So it was quite fun. People started failing all the time because they like cake, right? But so, Bask, how do you protect failure? Like at VMware, you're constantly innovating. The technology has a huge impact in your business. You need to experiment in new things. How are we doing that, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, unfortunately, my background is exactly opposite of these. I came from, this is the first startup I'm working for. VMware is a startup. I mean, I work for J&J, GlaxoSmithKline, Honeywell. And VMware is it looks like a huge company. I think that was the tweet of the day. VMware is a startup. Yeah, I don't think they'll be offended. They take pride in the fact that they are, nimble still. So I think, first of all, I think it's a myth that innovation comes only from startups. I mean, that's a Silicon Valley created ones. I mean, J&J will be insulted. All your cardiac arrests, the number of innovations that come from J&J, you can't call them not innovative. Honeywell has put Mars rovers and things on, a lot of things on space. That's really where rocket scientists are. So sometimes we look at a mobile app and say that is the innovation. And we forget that there's still Mars rover going in Mars, and nobody talks about it. I mean, it just bothers the hell out of me that our whole mind is all around ADD on what is the next big mobile app.
It hasn't been Snapchatted, that's why.
Yeah.
Or as John says, it's things we can see, right?
Yeah. So guys, if you haven't known, there's a couple of rovers going around in Mars taking photographs, and nobody's talking about it. Please tweet about it, right? So I think how to not prevent this is there's a complacency that comes with the large companies. And I found in my experience that the people who are change agents are the guys who block the next wave of change. So you got waves of change. And it's true. So what you have to worry is about the big person, the big group that drove change the last time are probably the blockers. Yeah. So I can give you examples. So mainframe folks who are highly innovative stop the mid-range computing. The mid-range computing stop the mini computers. The mini computers stop the internet. The internet guys cannot do mobile, right? So what you have to almost look at is who are your change agents, and you have to change your change agents because there's a complex. I mean, your brain gets wired for certain things. So what I have to constantly remind myself is, don't think you know everything, and you have to unwire your brains, and you have to have the willingness to learn from your kids and so on. I mean, you're still smarter than them. Don't let them kid you. But you have to be willing to unwire your brains, and you got to be interested in change. And so this pragmatism steps into a lot of the folks who have run change before. That's what we are careful about is don't make too many practical don't make too many things that appear to sound right. Challenge that, and also let the people who have the fresher ideas kind of survive, and don't kill it with your cleverness and pragmatism and experience. That's kind of what you are.
On that real quick? Yeah.
Because I think he's on a really important point that we forget sometimes living in our bubble, which is the Valley, which is, if I look at my last 6 years, I started as an entrepreneur, 75-ish person company, thought we were disrupting the world. We live that every day here in the Valley. And then I ended up in a job where I was the company that other people were disrupting. I suddenly had 1,500 people, $1 billion budget, and I realized about all the problems of scale and consistency that you have to do that you don't worry about as an entrepreneur, just get something out. And now I've pivoted back to, I guess what people like to call an entrepreneur, right? And now I'm disrupting again, only this time the mental model is I have to disrupt the job I just have. I have to disrupt ourselves. And it's actually much harder to disrupt the people you see than to disrupt the people you don't see. And I think that's part of the issue that we have at large companies on change. If you're a little bitty company, you're disrupting the evil giant over there in the corner. You don't really care. If you're inside of a company trying to instigate change, the person you're disrupting is sitting next to you and likely a colleague or maybe even a friend. And that mental change is hard. It's hard to be, quote unquote, mean to somebody you know.
So this is interesting then from a leadership perspective. When you have a large group of people out there that you're trying to motivate, you're trying to provide direction, alignment. How does this work, Jody?
For me, the strategy that has worked the best is really this empathy-based change. Right, and so when I first joined the company, I interviewed 75 people in 75 days. That was my goal. And I traveled to 16 different offices, and I really just took in a lot of information. I asked them all the same 5 questions, and I structured them, and the themes just jumped out. And only then would I figured out that if I could help those folks understand that I could see it the way that they see it, that I would have some ability to influence them. And then through that is like the first things to tackle were easily the things that had PageRank off of all of these people I interviewed. There was a lot of concentration around these core themes. And as it turns out, when you solve problems that people are frustrated about, they get excited. And then they're now your engines of change for you because you've actually maybe help them realize some benefit that they have. It's been a rock in their shoe for 10 years. And so that aspect of it is, I think logically we can talk to people about why this is better and why that's better all along, but until you can get the emotional kind of empathy, kind of their heart in it, it's not really going to happen.
It's great. And this is a concept we talk a lot about from Toyota, the go and see, go to the Gemba. But Joanne, what do you see most executive teams doing? Are they going to the Gemba?
No, they're sitting in their offices on the top floor of the headquarters and building strategy for the organization, making policies, and then telling people what their targets are for the upcoming year, and perhaps even to the point where this is how you will reach the target, whether it's by acquisitions or whether it's by increasing revenues or common decreasing costs, and then reading reports on how well the company's doing it, so relying, which have been sanitized, by the way, up through the ranks. So they really don't have a good view of what's happening in the company. They're relying on the finance department to figure out, whether we're going to meet our targets, and the analysts are going to give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, which will change the stock price, which will cause the stockholders to be happy or sad. And they let those financial and that traditional way to, and I call it manage, not lead an organization, interfere with actually everybody getting better, right? And letting their people who actually know what the customers want and how things work when you create a policy that actually prevents you from delivering better service to your customers. They don't sit and listen to them at all. They don't, yeah.
So for me, my experience is very similar, that is how many companies are managed. And it just creates this incredible moral hazard for the people creating policy and creating strategy. And I think a lot of it is based on ego. And I think ego is this force field that prevents you from learning, and it is amazing what you can learn when you go and talk to the people that are on the ground, like the ones that are, in a Scrum team delivering code or at a venue helping a client be successful. It is the insights you gain there. You have so much more information density than reading a report or the weekly checklist that someone sends out. I mean, it's amazing. So I think that there's a lot of wisdom in what Joanne says of getting out there and seeing it.
Excuse me. What I was going to say is we have decision-making biases. Our experience. That's the way we've always done things. That's the way it's taught in management school. If I get my degree in information technology or MBA, it teaches me that's the way you're supposed to do it, and it's wrong, right? You come out of MBA or you come out of college with a business degree, and you realize, like my daughter said to me, she goes, "They never told us any of this stuff." And she goes, "And it's just all wrong," And I go, "Yeah, it is. So your job is to help change it." And I would challenge everybody in this room and ask them, what do you do to help change that in your organization? And a lot of us just go with the status quo because we know that if we upset it, we won't get our bonus, or we won't, get promoted, or, there's all sorts of things, barriers to prevent us from getting better.
Right. So how do we blow this up, Dalton?
Yeah, so one of the first things I'd say is take a hard look at your KPIs. I'm an analytics guy by background, and I think the worst phrase in corporate America, maybe it's everywhere, is what gets measured get done. And every time I hear somebody say that on one of these podiums, I roll my eyes, because what that means is people just measure everything and use that as an excuse. And my own mantra is not everything that can be measured matters, and not everything that matters can be measured. And every time I see one of these dashboards with seas of green and yellows, I just blow them up. They don't mean anything. They're designed to hide information as to what's really going on and to cascade up so that only good news surfaces. I'm very much of a manage by exception. I don't care about current status. The question I ask is, what's the trend? Are you making progress? Are you trending up? Or are you trending down? And how rapidly? The acceleration, if you want to get into it. To be fair, if you're a boss, you can do a lot more about something that's green and trending down than you can about something that's red and trending up. Red and trending up is good. Don't focus on the red, the trend line. So kill your dashboards. Yes, I know, I sell dashboards to most of you. Sorry about that. But you've got the wrong things on your dashboard. Too many measures.
It's a little bit of a contrarian. I had to give a plug for the Silicon Valley, not for the dashboards. We'll kill it. Actually, you run it on SAP, so that's good. I can save a ton of money.
My sales rep.
Did you guys hear at Deloitte? We don't need dashboards. So I think the thing on management and leadership is I actually find that in the Silicon Valley, the leadership is a lot more humble than. I mean, I worked on the East Coast and other places. It's a night and day.
You say we're a lot more humble here.
We're a lot more humble from culture perspective. I mean, at least they're big egos, but you're approachable. So,
Poll of the audience: who finds Silicon Valley executives approachable? Comparative to East Coast?
right.
Okay.
I mean, you guys want to talk to?
It looks like half the room. Okay, good. Well, we'll move on.
So the thing is, so our CEO. I mean, I'm just giving an example of. I spend an enormous amount of time with customers. So I know that because I get emails from all these customers saying, "I met your CEO. He thinks that you should be buying my software." Right. So I know that he's spending enormous, and him and his leadership team, they spend enormous amount of time with the actual customer, which is a good thing. The other one is the MBA point is what Gemba is just look-see, right? You got to go and look-see. Yeah. Anytime we start using the Japanese term and thinking this now we invented something new, did you do a Gemba walk? How is that different than a walk? Do I have to have a limp or what is this? And then we have to do Kaizen. Oh, we don't want to do improvements, but we want to do Kaizen. So I think sometimes we throw this. You do a Gemba walk and then do a Kaizen. So 3 Japanese words. So I'm thinking, again, it's a kind of fad management into something common sense, what you do. But should we spend more time with employees and getting down to those ranks? Yeah, we should do that. I think as the companies grow very fast, you do lose touch with the people who are actually developing software and real work. We should do that. But I think my experience is we definitely spend quite a bit of time with the customers.
So how are the customers helping you create new products in your business? Jonathan, what kind of new products are coming?
Yeah, so
you're listening to your customers, you're co-creating with them.
I don't know if you intentionally gave me that as a layup question, because my new role is essentially, I got to get myself in trouble when I say this, to make a direct connect between development and customers without all the middle chain, without having to deal with sales reps, without having to deal with channel partners, and I know I'm going to make a lot of enemies of people in this room and whoever's maybe listening online, and actually have a direct connection from the co-creation process of. And I say customers, I don't like that word because mostly people think of big buildings and companies, and I mean the individuals within them and what they need, because big glass buildings don't buy software, people do, and the ability to buy it. So what that means is we suddenly have to change the way we develop so that every feature, every Scrum is actually directed not by a Scrum Master inside the company, but potentially by a Scrum Master outside the company as well. And that voting on what features go into the product happen publicly on the web with people that may actually consume it later. And if you vote for something, then you get early access to it, maybe even at no cost before anybody else does it as well. So we're trying to reinvent the process so that an individual can buy SAP on their credit card and use it within 1 hour.
Jody, now you're interesting. 1 hour, okay. But Jody, you're a Ticketmaster, right? You've got loads of people trying to eat your lunch coming through at the moment.
Oh, yes.
So what are you doing to find the next winning product?
So for us, we take a bit different strategy, similar but a bit different in that we have our Ticketmaster Labs where we invite a set of clients in a given segment, say arts or sports, to come in and really help us understand what's important to them. And then we take it one step deeper and get them deep into the roadmap, sort of like a product advisory council. But what's been really incredible and sort of groundbreaking for us is that we've actually started to give clients early access to our systems and getting them in and really going and talking to them. As it turns out, clients really want to talk to the people making their products. And historically, much like Jonathan was saying, we have a lot of interference between the product development organization and our clients. And there's this need to want to control the message. And I don't think you learn anything in a controlled environment, right? I think you need to have this unfiltered, unfettered access, and it's not over email. Like your eyes are 20 gigabits a second processing data. So you can imagine how much information you lose over an email or a PowerPoint, right? Sitting there and understanding what the user's doing when they click this button. You don't see the frown on their face, or you don't hear the, right? And it's those types of things where a product developer, whether it be a designer, a product manager, or an engineer, can take that input in and really solve that problem. Again, I go back to empathy-based change. Every person on my team, they want to solve a problem, and they want to see they would love to see the results of their work. So when they go there and they solve that issue that the client from the amphitheater in Tampa had, it's incredibly rewarding. And so it gives them that dopamine hit that makes them put in all the discretionary effort that they could get. And in a big company, that's one of the biggest challenges I've observed, is that folks are so disconnected from their output. They don't really have the chance to see it. In my dream world, I want to be a sushi chef, because you get to make the food and watch the person eat it, right? Like, talk about feedback on your work.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not a Japanese.
More Japanese.
Why can't you just be a chef?
Because
everywhere.
a chef is back in the kitchen. I want to be out there with the customers, and they can tell me whether I did a good job or not, right?
Great. So Joanne, how do we get teams more connected with their customers? How do we get people re-engaged back in work? Gallup recently did a survey on employees to understand how engaged they were. And only 13%, 13% of employees in your company are actively engaged in work.
Do the engaged ones answer the survey, or the disengaged ones?
That's a good question. But I guarantee you, if I ask any of you on a panel what's the most important part of my company, everyone's going to tell me it's my people.
Hands down.
But only if 13% of your people are actively engaged, that's a huge opportunity for performance improvement. So what can we do in that space, Joanne?
Well, I think it truly starts with the culture of the organization, and it's a culture of experimentation. So there's quite a thing with regards to the people that's required. You have to choose people with the right attitude, like I want to learn, I want to grow. If you get somebody who goes, well, I've got my MBA now, so I should get the executive position because I've earned it, then that's the wrong person. You need to hire somebody who says, I want to grow with the company, I want to learn, I want to change. The second thing is you have to structure the organization so that people can make decisions. So if we've that affect the way they work and affect the outcome for the customers. So if I had the privilege of working for an airline in Canada called WestJet that had this amazing culture. And one of the things they did, and it was modeled off of the Southwest model, a low cost, but when the founders created it, they said, we're going to let our people do the best they can for customers. In order to do that, we've got to loosen the boundaries we place around them. And so it was even a call center agent, if they heard a story about somebody whose parents died or has died, and they have to get somewhere really fast, they would bust their butts to get that person there and give them a discount on the flight. And sometimes we'd just fly people free because that was the right thing to do. But we create all these boundaries and policies that prevent people from doing the right thing for customers. So you have to loosen up a bit to be able to scale that learning and experimentation. And the same company carried that experimentation not just in IT. We were one of the first airlines to have electronic tickets in North America. First airline to use the check-in kiosks. First airline to use the electronic boarding pass. And that was pervasive. That experimentation went through the company to the airline operations even. We never did things big. We'd always say, what's the smallest experiment we could do to check and see if our hypothesis is correct? So we think some of our customers want to fly overseas, but we don't have the aircraft that are, that would make it that long. We're all using 737s. So, if we stop in Gander for our fuel, to get more fuel, we could fly to Dublin, which is what they did in the last 2 years. Now they're flying to Glasgow without creating a whole new fleet that could fly direct from Toronto or Vancouver through to Dublin or Glasgow. But now they said, oh, you know what? Our customers want to do it. And we know that they'll pay for it. We're going to buy wide-body aircraft to make that direct flight connection.
So now we're starting to think about the future, right? What's going to make organizations successful in the future? Now, Bask, you're in a really interesting technology-impacted industry. In some respects, VMware innovated to take over the hardware space. Now cloud is coming into you and challenging your space. What do you see in the future? What are the technology innovations that are really going to drive your space forward specifically?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is this whole thing of automation, and I'll just explain that. When I first came to this country 30 years ago, and I come from a family of farmers, and to farm like 25 acres of rice was very difficult. You need to work for laborers and fight this, and you work all year round, and then just during harvest, the people go on strike or something, and you're so labor dependent, and then you literally are starving, right, after working all year round. So I come here and I go to Indiana, Bern, Indiana, and there's a farmer who's doing it part-time with Caterpillar trucks. He's got 50 acres that he's doing it himself or herself, right? And I said, wow, this country is great with all the automation. Now I look at IT world and technology. It is so not automated. There's armies of people coming in from all over the world doing mundane things like backups.
You can hire them.
It's still not, the data centers are run by millions of people, and we're going to lower and lower cost locations to source labor. We're fighting we don't have talent. A lot of the work that we do is still not automated. And I think we've gone into cooler and cooler features and forget, not taking the labor component out.
Yeah.
Large IT shops, people have thousands of people. Then we outsource the problem, right? So that's one. If you look at software, automation is something we have to work at. While VMware is working on it, it's not just a plug. I want all of us to focus on take the human thing away. That's the whole point of IT is to kind of automate. And we're doing really mundane things with lower cost labor.
I think this idea of automation means it frees up people to use more creative thinking, right?
And so then think about this. I think our kids are our grandchildren are going to look and say, wow, there's a cool company here. 2 companies here, kind of make all the innovations on mobile phone. But in Mountain View, 2 companies do that in Mountain View, Cupertino. None of the phones are made here. And I don't care where it gets made. It's not a political statement. It's just that look at the supply chain nightmare of going across this stuff, putting all this in a ship, bringing it all back to sell it back in Mountain View, the phones. Somebody's going to look at this in the future, I hope, and say, this is crazy. You guys made the software, you invented it, you couldn't make it? What about 3D printing, other kind of stuff, So, again, the labor component of it, so we want to get the cheapest source of labor, move it across this stuff, pollute everybody, bring it back on ships across, To me, that looks like really silly. I understand the financials and economics and all the other stuff. I'm just thinking this is silly. Some kids are going to look and say, is this what you did? You made the phone and then you send it across and you're bringing water from somewhere else, from Fiji. Apparently there's no water anywhere, so you have to get Fiji and Evian. You look at all this and you're spending more water and fuel and stuff to get water across. So I'm thinking in the future the supply chain gets smarter and smarter through automation rather than labor arbitrage.
Jonathan, what about yourself? What are some of the things you see?
Can I disagree with him?
Yes, you can, please. Yeah.
So I'll start with agreeing and then end up disagreeing, just to see where he goes. So make you feel good and then realize I didn't actually agree with you. No,
it's just the point of view.
So, to be fair, every company is a technology company. We've heard that phrase over and over again. And if we're overtly tech companies, everybody else is a tech company anyway. So what does a tech company do when everybody else is a tech company? In my opinion is we have to make tech invisible. And that's where I agree with you, because right now tech is too visible. It's front and center, partially because it's not automated, but partially because it's just too hard. I don't remember ever having to reboot my car. Maybe I did once, or my TV, or et cetera, and yet we have to do that all the time. But I don't know if full automation is a desirable goal or not, because I'm not sure removing humans from the chain is something that we want to do. I do want to simplify humans' jobs, and I think, oddly, what I got trained on, my early career was human factors, human-computer interface, is where we're back again. Only it's how do humans and AI, how do robots and humans interact more? And I think it's back to the original concept in the 70s and the 80s of decision support. We lost that idea of how do we help people make smarter decisions, and we turned into these automated reports and automated systems which are lights out, which don't adopt in real time. And I'm sorry, I don't have kids, but every time I buy something for a niece, Amazon decides that I suddenly must have had 12 kids, and every ad gets served to me as if I have young kids. And so we're I think, focused too much on the holy grail of automation and not enough of simplifying the task for humans to make business decisions. And that's where I disagree with you.
In my mind, I agree with actually both of you, if that's okay.
I totally disagree. You have to make up your mind.
Pick a side right now.
In my mind, leading is finding a space in between forward, right? So for me, what I see is we have to build technology that can deal with the crazy pace of like speed and complexity, right? So our world is way more complex than it used to be. Like the human brain cannot handle all of this complexity, and the management structures of companies can't handle the pace of change at all. And it used to be okay to do month-end reporting, right? At my last startup, we had by the minute revenue, and we acted on it within 15 minutes because the market could turn against us, and we had to adjust that. So I think that it's a shock to the system when big companies who used to compete at the quarterly level, right? They used to get their scoreboard once a quarter, then they went to once a month, and now they're competing with companies that are living in real time, or I'll say 5 to 15 minutes. And I'm a 100% subscriber to John Boyd, law of iteration, right? So speed of iteration beats the quality of iteration every single time. And I think that that's why large companies get disrupted, is because the smaller companies can react to information faster and can evolve faster. And what Jonathan was saying about the antibodies is that there is zero risk in staying the same. There's zero apparent risk. So why would you ever change? But you cannot get better unless you change. And so I think that it's companies creating technology and processes and mindset of the folks on their team to be able to deal with this speed and complexity, to be able to power this decision support of how should I change next? What's the next change I need to make to move in the direction that I'm trying to go, to ratchet forward?
Joanne, what do you see are some of those practices and principles then that allow companies to sort of sense and respond to these opportunities in the future?
Well, I think thinking small, working small is the biggest one. So you talked about, to be safe today is risky. We all think that the traditional way we've been taught to build software and use manual testing and use automation is the way to do it with that big waterfall upfront planning. That is the riskiest way you can do things today when it comes to building software. That big upfront planning and big bang releases. You have to break it down to smaller. Now, you still need the long-term targets, but you have to break it down to smaller chunks and experiments, and I keep falling back to that. And allowing teams the liberty to operate in a way that's works best for them. And so we talk about that aligned but autonomous, that I could make decisions on how our team works as long as I understand that if it doesn't affect another team negatively and that it drives us towards the final goal, that it would probably be acceptable. But if I'm going to fail, I fail small. I'm not failing big. Right. And then I learn from that failure so I can move around and progressively get better. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about technology, automation. I'm surprised robots didn't come up, so thank you. I said robots. Oh, did you say robots? Okay. AI robots. Yeah, that also always comes with Japan, right? The robots are going to save Japan with an aging population. But what I'd really like to talk a little bit more now is about not robots, but people. And what are we going to see the biggest impact for people as we move forward? Not only in terms of the way we find these people, the way we source these people. Traditionally, Silicon Valley, if ever, is this monoculture, this mono-character, this mono-male, white. Like, what are we doing to bring more people into this environment? Bask, what are your thoughts on this?
So I never let facts get in the way of truth, so I may be wrong here. But I don't think, first of all, I don't think my kids are going to work for a company that makes just money. And I think you need to do some social good. And the best people are going to come for people. Companies say they're changing the world, and what are they changing? They're making faster gadgets. That's not changing the world. So when you say changing the world, there's still a lot of in San Jose. There are kids who are not, who are being abused and so on. There's so many things going on here. You don't have to even go into a faraway country. So companies have to do a lot more, and not just a few clubs and sponsor and so on. I know my kids will not work for a company that just does not do evil. You have to do more than not doing evil. You have to do good. And you have to do a lot of good. So, so that's not I don't think it's a fact, but I want you guys to write it like a fact, put some stats behind it, so people actually do it, even if you have to lie to make people do the right thing. So I think that's fun. The second thing that you need to do is the style of leadership has changed. I used to work for a guy called Larry Bossidy. He wrote a book called Execution, and he made Jack Welch look like a nice guy. You learn a lot from those folks. It's great on execution, leadership, my best experience, better than any MBA school can do. I would not want to, my kids won't work for him. I would not want to work for a person like this anymore. The styles change, and I'm sure he has changed by now. My kids will start crying if you work for a leader like that, right? So I think this empathy-based leadership, a more collegial, make people, get more things, like being a friend and a coach. That style has to change. There are a few leaders who are evolving, but I think there's some training needs to be done on how can you get things done, execute, but also have this thing where you can connect to people with empathy. I honestly don't know if I would want to work for a Steve Jobs. We talk of him like a hero, and he is in a lot of ways. I don't know if I would want to work for a person like that. So I think that leadership style has to completely change. A couple of things on diversity. Just a call out. There's so many articles written about not enough women. There's not enough African Americans in Silicon Valley, and we selectively are pruning old people, and nobody talks about it. Women, at least, some talk have started to come about it, but the pruning of older people, it happens. There are executives from companies in the Valley who are telling me that, oh, yes, we're laying off people, but you know how many people are hiring from schools? So this concept, some of it is the book promoters, some of them the innovation is all young folks, and all innovation only comes from young people, and the old people are to be discarded. That has to change. Because we are going to have a more and more aging population. That's just wrong thinking. And my wife, I'm sure a lot of women here fought these battles 30 years ago. In J&J, 30 years ago, we had diversity training, gender awareness. We got a lot of women leaders in good positions and so on. We're having the same discussion now with Anita Borgen Institute and so on. It's like, we made no progress. And every time the same thing. Oh, look at Sheryl Sandberg. Okay, we can name 3 people, and then we're stuck. So, sorry to get passionate. I don't know. I don't have the solutions. I'm just a rant. But we got to do something about this. We can't just keep,
And the passion is important. But Joanne, I'm interested to hear your experience in this space, and as a woman, as a leader.
I wish I had $1 for every time I was in a room where the men outnumbered the woman for each man that was there, outnumbering. I wouldn't be here on the stage. I wouldn't have had to write a book. I'd be retired. We have to stop thinking of people as vessels that are filled up by our higher education institutes that we then drain, of their knowledge, of their passion, one way or the other. And then when they're used up, we discard them. I think that we have to start taking responsibilities as leaders of what we do to people within our organizations and whether we're able to enrich their lives and enrich the rest of the world. So as I was listening to a conversation between Eric Ries and I think it was Ben Horowitz about how Andreessen Horowitz is trying to make investments with companies who will make a difference in people's lives. So thinking about the latest app that virtually doesn't improve anybody's lives, but creates a lot of money, opposed to something even like an Uber, despite everything else that, the bad things that happen with that. But the ability to create jobs for people who previously didn't have jobs, right? Or the liberty to set your own work hours and the number of rides you would take, for example, would pick up 2 or 3 rides instead of having to work an 8-hour shift in order just to make ends meet. And it's those sorts of things that we have to start thinking about. It's just like, is this decision we're making actually going to improve lives of people, either in a workplace if we're selling something like SAP, and that's our product or service, or if we're, building, like ThoughtWorks, an app for medical records, a free app for managing medical records in developing countries. Yeah.
One more to build on that, John?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I have a couple different perspectives on this. One, there's 36 women in the room in the audience, and there's like 130. I don't do math; I just count more than once. But so that's maybe 25%, and so it's sort of a statement to what you were saying, is that if women are 51% of the population and they're less than half represented, I think there's a lot of opportunity in there. And for me, what I think is that whether it be gender or race or background or ethnicity or background of study, age, everyone brings a different perspective to the problem. And then when we can bring those different perspectives, we can get a better solution. And it sounds cliche, but I observe it all the time. My best teams are the ones that look like the Bad News Bears, sort of, and a combination of very interesting, unique folks that have found their rhythm to work together. So I think that there's an opportunity to actively look for diversity and to sort of fight the programmer culture of some Silicon Valley startups. And I think you'll get a better result. I know that at least I've found that. And then the other perspective on that is that the skill I look for in people are the ones that are really good at learning, because what they know today in the technology world is not actually going to be that relevant 5 years from now, right? I mean, all of those SAP ABAP programmers who got rich during year 2000, that's not that much irrelevant of a skill. But if the ability to learn, and I think that comes from kind of being from being forced to learn, so being in a competitive environment. And again, I think that the large enterprises, especially the well-established industry leaders, they don't have to learn, so they don't, and it's like a muscle, and then they get out of shape, and then an upstart comes and who's in better shape, who's been training, they come and they take a piece of their business, or worse yet, they take their whole business. So, please.
So I just to go down to take this to the practical face it right now, I think in 10 years there are probably very few, if any, traditional hierarchical organizations that hire people, train them, and expect them to stay for long periods of time. And if there are any left, they're on life support as opposed to growing successfully. I look at my dad, and maybe many of your parents, he essentially worked for the same company for his entire professional life. I look at my own career, depending on when it ends, I'll have worked for 7 to 10 employers, which is probably about average. I look at the next generation, the estimates are they'll work for 20 to 30 average employers, and the number is just going to keep going up. The control is from the employee side, not the employer side.
Absolutely.
All the hire to retire processes, all the onboard, get rid of all that crap. You're actually getting in the way of people doing useful work by slowing them down. We need to think about not climbing the corporate ladder and how that structure works, but how you create, and I don't have a good analogy for it yet, and I will admit I'm doing an experiment right now inside of a big old company, and I'm basing it on a company in Brazil called Vagas Software, which is about 500 people, where none of us have official roles, none of us have official titles. We're a self-organizing team. Whoever recognizes the problem has this responsibility for solving that problem. Yes, we have our own sort of ripcord that we can pull that's a virtual ripcord. That's right. And does it work? No, it doesn't work yet. But something like that is going to replace most companies that people, quote unquote, work for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Jonathan, for myself, recruiting for my company is very challenging, right? So we're a large established company. We don't have the same participation like many Silicon Valley's companies have. And for me, I think about it as this way to create a really compelling employee value proposition, right? So we have to be a desired place to work. Yeah. And it's all about kind of the people that folks work with, the challenge of the work, do they get to learn, and then the size of the impact that they can make. And for large established companies, the folks that I want to work with, they can work wherever they want. Yeah. And it's very challenging for large established companies with lots of processes and salary bands and all of these rules around it to do that. And I think that what Jonathan's saying is really making the company stand for something, kind of what you were saying. It sort of adds to this. Because it's no longer good enough just to pay well, right? Like ask all the consulting companies that they've dropped from 2.6 years to 2.1 years in the last 5 years, right? So think about that. It's pretty amazing.
Well, on that note, I'd like to firstly thank all of our great panelists here for the conversation that we've talked about. We've looked at challenges today, cultural, leadership, product development, the things that everyone is experiencing today that are going to drive their future success. We've talked about Japanese culture, food, robots, heart attacks, immune systems, life support systems. But I think, as you can see from these people, the thing they constantly go back to is, what's the impact it's going to have on the future? What's the mission that people are working towards? Because that's the unifying force for people. That's what's going to draw them into their company. They want to be part of their mission. They want to change the world. And it's not necessarily about making dollars. So on that note, I'd like to invite people from the audience to go back to your notepad, those questions that you had, the contradictions that you wanted to put to these people. And I'll invite questions from the audience. Okay, do we just over here, please? Thanks. If you just introduce yourself and then the question, please.
Hello, good morning. My name is Andres Davidovitz with Loyal 3 in San Francisco. Quick question about leadership training. How do you guys train your leaders? We're a small 130, 150 person startup, and I'm head of product, and I have a bunch of product managers, and we're starting to pay attention more to their growth, their leadership, outside of being a good colleague and empathetic and formal training. What do you guys do to help your leaders so that they're strong, effective leaders?
At Ticketmaster, in the last 3 years, the history of the company, we've been around 39 years, and we just started having really official leadership training maybe 4 years ago. We had version 1.0 of it. And recently, we have refreshed that, and we started with the leadership philosophy that the management team could agree on. So like a brief, and it covered all the aspects of what we believe leadership is, which was so strong, because now we have something, kind of an artifact that everyone can rally around. And we're in the process of putting, I think, 600 people, 600 managers across the company through this 3-day leadership training where it's about, first day is about the self, second day is about individuals, and third day is about teams. And it's a big investment for us, but we've had 3 classes go through, maybe 75 people, and they come out energized, and everyone has the same sort of expectations around what leadership is, and it's been pretty incredible so far.
Okay, and next question? Yeah. There's loads of hands, great, but I think trying to get microphones.
Good morning. Cesar Orozco, I work for NetApp. You've mentioned change quite a bit today, leadership and people. How do you guys? I guess we can all agree that managing a team or leading a team when revenue is growing, your company's market share is growing, is easier than when things are tough. 2-part question for you guys: how do you yourselves get ready for change? And number 2, how do you lead your teams in difficult times to keep them engaged and motivated? Thank you.
I have worked on difficult times with difficult companies before, Honeywell being one of them. I think the best leadership, actually you work hardest when the times are difficult. The best leadership is when you're not making money, because growth hides a lot of inefficiencies. And I found a lot of companies here were flying high. Everybody writes books about them on leadership. It's always great to write books about, they have coffee, that's why they are, growing at 30%. And so making correlations like that. The real good leadership, in my experience, has been in downturns. So I think first is the leaders themselves should believe they should. Everybody's trying to jump ship. The leaders should know that there are times when you have to ride the wave, and the leaders needs to be engaged. That's the problem most companies have in a downturn is the leaders themselves want to jump ship, and the people just sense it. So that's the first thing, because you have to kind of lead from the front and show that there is a promised land somewhere, and you have to be in the front and lead them through the desert for a long time before you can't just say, here's the promised land, you go, I'm going to go join Juniper or somebody else, right? So I think it's true test of leadership is that the leaders have to stay in the front. They have to paint that vision and work through that. And I think the people have to know that there are always ups and downs in the company, and this is a great learning opportunity, and they shouldn't miss it. So people should want to go through tough times. Not for a long time, but for a period of. I think what my best learnings. So I'm not a big. We got a lot of training. God knows I needed a lot of help on leadership. But the best training is working for different CEOs, different companies, different coasts. I worked on different places in the U.S., in the world. I lived in China. Worked in India. I don't know how I can train my kids in 15 minutes on, this is the things to learn. So this is where that Gemba, go do different jobs, go through experience. Be in a tough company. Don't just come back and say you work for 8 growth companies that grew from whatever. That tells me you're just a cog in the wheel. So how you sell the story to folks is probably more important.
Nice.
So can I just add 1 second there?
Yeah.
I think the best experience is my worst experience. I was CEO of a publicly traded company in February 2000, and you can imagine we went from 800 employees to 100 employees in the span of 3 days. And that, we're all victim of our circumstances, and that experience lives with me to today, because I was a little too young to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, like half the Valley was at that point. And so a significant part of my and my leadership's team is designed to, if we were trying to disrupt ourselves, what would we do? How would we build the next company, the next product, the next environment to put us out of business? And that paranoia is the thing that I use to help stimulate change. Because if we can find our own, we're more likely to find our own weakness than a third party. Find your own weakness and then swarm to go fix it.
Okay, next question.
Hi. Thanks, you guys, for talking very insightful stuff. My name's Jin Shin Yang. I work at The Gap. I have a question for Jonathan. You mentioned something around can't be done if it can't be measured. I'm playing around with some business experimentation within my group, and I'm wondering how do you transition from something that can't be measured to can't be done to something more ambiguous about trends or not. You talked a little bit about that. If you can
to be clear, I said don't follow the mantra that says it can't be done unless it can be measured. So this is a long conversation, and one of the things I'm most passionate about, but the simplest answer is measure outcomes, not activities. Most measurement is how much water is throwing through the pipe, or how thick the pipe is, or how many T's in the pipe is, not did the grass get greener or not. And at the end of the day, all the bluster about how many people showed up at your website and how big your event was and what's the size of the pipeline, none of that matters. Only measure the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And that outcome-oriented is a very tough mentality to have.
Great. Next question. A few in the back here.
Thank you. This is a question for Jonathan, a practical question. My name is Peter Meyer. I write about creating new markets, and this is for the next book. So, your dashboard.
Yes.
What's on it today? What'll be on it in 30 months?
So I can't actually technically answer that. I will tell you that the measure that is the one measure that I'm worrying right now is percentage of customers that go productive in less than an hour. It'll probably be revenue. To be fair, I'm a publicly traded company, and so some percentage of revenue and dealing with the quarterly street expectation will probably be forced on me by 30 months.
Okay,
No
next question, please.
Although I'll resist it.
Down here.
Hi, my name is John Linan. I'm a partner in Zerb. It's a product design company. We live here in the Valley, and let's say starting with the startups and the graduated startups, everyone wears a lot of hats. But as you grow a larger organization, as you get the corporate organizational structure, as silos and kingdoms start getting built, how do you continue to have that empathy? Not just maybe empathy with your colleagues in your division, but empathy across the company, empathy with the customer. Learning organizations, nodes. Is there a number that you found that it works for? Does it break down in certain areas? how do you get people to kind of continue to say it's okay to keep trying?
Sure. So for us, what we've spent the last couple of years trying to do is trying to break this big company down into smaller pieces, and decomposing a large, well-grown company is very challenging. These functional silos are real, and they're not just in technology. They're in. We had a new person take over marketing, and she's like, I'm trying to run a campaign for the Grammys, and social doesn't talk to PR, doesn't talk to content, doesn't talk to... And so now we've started to pivot that and take it one step further and really align people along these missions. And every mission has a customer-facing goal. And we'll know we're successful when they identify themselves as, I work on the seasonal promotion team instead of I work for... I do PR, right? And so when the primary tribe that people identify with is their customer-facing value stream, then we'll know we've really changed something. And we're actually trying to create the incentives to do that, where 80% of your review and bonus is determined by your team in which you deliver value, not by your boss. So it incentivizes you to start trying to please your customers and stop trying to please your boss. It's an experiment, like you said. We'll see how that goes.
I look forward to hearing how that plays out.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Yep, sure.
I guess I gave me the mic. So I'm Frodo Odegaard. I run the Lean Systems Institute, and one of the things I've been really curious about for the three of you in the middle, which we haven't heard about so far, is the experience that you've had actually deploying Lean Enterprise methodology and Lean leadership in your companies. So I was hoping to hear some stories or some good or bad, so that'd be interesting.
How about I tell the bad story first? You guys can tell the good story. When we first decided that we were going to go lean, we did it exactly the way you aren't supposed to do it, which is we announced, hey, you're all going to be lean. It'll be good for you. It's like going on a diet. We'll be more nimble, et cetera. And we created a bunch of policies and procedures and said, thou shalt follow them. And guess what? The corporate antibody immune system showed up, and it just failed miserably. When we stepped back and said, why didn't this work? Isn't lean the greatest thing since sliced bread? Let's hire more consultants. No offense to anybody that might be a consultant.
That's good.
And then we stepped back and said, we haven't told the story of what we're trying to change and why this is an important thing to do. And forget about the activity of lean. Let's talk about the outcome we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to go there, and give people the device of lean as one way, maybe not the only to get there. That's worked a lot better.
Change isn't an event.
I mean, I haven't read the book, so this is. But I'm a Six Sigma Lean certified person. I don't know if that's the lean we're talking about. If this is a different lean, so I think the trick is to fall into the traps. I think these become like sometimes it becomes like mantra. So I'm after working in a Six Sigma environment for a very long time, I saw a lot of improvements, and then now I'm thinking that actually killed innovation. Because you're doing continuous improvements and you're changing a little bit, and you're missing that comes from way on the left field, right? So that's why I don't like to get religious on all this. I mean, these are good ideas, and you should incorporate a whole bunch of ideas in your armor and use the right ones. But what I worry about it is sometimes you use that as the only weapon, and then say we're going to be lean, and which means that we're going to measure. We do only one thing at a time, no multitasking. We're going to streamline, blah blah blah. We're going to flowchart it. That's the only caution I do. Is lean absolutely works, especially in a manufacturing, administrative, and other kind of works, and we've saved a ton of money. I will just caution on, don't just overplay one technique. Have it as an important armor, weapon and everything.
Right. Okay. Next question. Yeah. Great.
I guess I'll be the token woman. So my question is regarding the employee engagement percentage. And this question is for non-ThoughtWorkers, because I'm at ThoughtWorks, so I kind of know what we do. I've heard a lot about engaging with customers, customer development, customer success, leadership going out and talking to customers to understand what they're building. How about the internal customers, like your own employees, especially for the big companies, like large companies? I still feel there is a huge gap between leadership or executive team versus employees who are middle management and below. So what are you one thing that you can recommend or advise that you're currently doing to increase that love factor between leadership and employees?
So I can take that. I think for us, we have a program we started called the Breathing Customer Oxygen, where our folks go out and they experience what our customers experience. And we've even done that internally. So like with the call center, the folks that provide call center technology, they go and they experience what it's like to be on the phone with a passionate fan who might not have gotten the ticket that they want. You learn all kinds of new words. So that's how we approach it, is just kind of making that transparent and helping those folks that are on the front lines feel appreciated. And just the act of setting that up, much less not counting the experience of it, it creates this connection that we've found has been really helpful for us.
Okay. Next question there. Yep.
My name is Joanne from ThoughtWorks. Hi, my name is Joanne from ThoughtWorks. You mentioned, that you need to create room to make failures and, learn from the failures. And at the same time, you talked about having some decision-making framework in place, helping people to make decisions right. I was wondering if you have any examples of, how you help people make decisions at different levels and what characteristics these frameworks have.
I'll use a very comical one as a simple example, and then maybe someone's got a more concrete one, which is take a look at your expense report policy. Most companies' expense report policy, if you printed it out, is 10, 20, 30, even 40 pages long. My rule of thumb is pretend it's your own money.
I think it's good to talk about how you make decisions to folks. I mean, I think people all believe that everything is a consensus decision. And what is the definition of consensus?
I don't agree with that.
Right. That's the point. That's the point. I honestly say, listen, there are going to be 10, 20% of decisions that's going to be directed from me because people are expecting me to make decisions. And there will be 20% that are consensus. I think consensus is the worst form of decision making. And a lot of it will be consultative. So I would expect you to make 10% of your decisions or 20% is directive. And whatever your stated objective is, tell them, because people don't know how to make decisions in that context, right? So, and then also when you include them, they don't feel like, well, this guy listened to me for like 3 hours, then picked the exact opposite one. I told him I was going to do that. And the reason I listened to you is because I want to have your consultation, but it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. So we haven't done training on what decisions are and how we make decisions in a company and how you think about it. So just spending a few minutes on this is how we like decisions is a good idea.
Yeah, I really like that. For me, I find it really great in my world when people explain kind of their thinking and putting the why behind a decision and adding as much context as possible and as appropriate. I find that to be incredibly helpful for me, and even with my team. Although you have to be very careful about how you ask the question, what were you thinking when you made this decision? I've done that really wrong before, so you don't have to do that. I pay tuition on how not to do that. So, but really kind of getting folks to expose their thinking, at least for me, it's really helpful. I learn a lot from the folks on my team and for the folks that I work for.
Our family never eats dinner outside because we try to make a consensus decision on the restaurants, and we all end up starving.
Yeah.
You know that.
I think in decision making too, it's really important that everybody within the organization understands what's the target state that we're trying to achieve. So what is it we're trying to do? When I worked at WestJet, it was put bums in seats, right? So is what you're going to do that? And then the other thing is you need the boundaries too. Like you need to know, don't cross this line. So for many organizations, is keep people safe. And if you can provide that direction plus the boundaries, it's a lot easier for people to make decisions on a daily basis.
That's the expense reporting policy, not rules, boundary conditions.
Okay, so 2 more questions. So there's loads of hands, yeah?
Oh, hi. My name is Nick Musset. I'm a college student. I actually just finished my first year at Emory University. And I started a firm with my brother. He just finished his junior year at Harvard. And it's called the Millennial Partners. And that's because for us, our age group, we are millennials. And so I guess the name kind of speaks for itself, having partners be an age group of millennials. And we essentially are a group of college students, and we created this firm essentially to act as kind of like, instead of creating companies and having, like you said, having people that have streamlined positions and structures, saying like having a person doing IT, having someone do supply chain, we have partners that essentially work as one collective brain, and that is the way that instead of having somebody assigning tasks, everyone thinks collectively. And so we essentially just come up with different ideas of creating new companies. And one of the things that we've thought about was how a lot of startups in Silicon Valley are really fragmented. How everyone's doing big data, everyone's doing cloud and stuff like that. And instead of how if that's the future, if everyone's starting their own cloud company, their own big data company, their own IT company.
So how we can put it together, or?
Yeah, so how, if, instead of us coming up with another, cloud, another tech app like that, what if we, I guess my question is, what is the future going towards, in the sense of consolidation of, I guess, what's the future of, is it going to be 1,000 different, fragmented companies, startup companies, or is it going to be, one, or just a few, powerhouse companies that control, I guess, what is the future to?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I think we've got to.
One thing I can predict that in 10 years, what's going to happen? You're going to be very successful. In 10 years, you're going to have to change the name of your company, right? Because you won't be a millennial, and you're just excluding old folks out.
That's right.
and don't think the only cool people are people who get out of school who are, So good luck, but 10 years, you're going to change your name. That's one prediction for sure.
By the way, a branding consultant would have charged you millions of dollars to come up with that.
It's free.
That's all right. I've sent to the interest. Don't worry.
No, so to be serious, it's refreshing that you do that. That's the fresh thought, though. So think about this in the Valley, and the quick answer is, a lot of the trends that you hear about in the Valley are not really trends. These are people who come and talk to me, consultants talk to me, and I'm in the middle of something, and I had to give them something cool. So I tell them, I think this is this. And they interviewed 30 other people like me, and then they write books about it, and they write the trends. And then it comes back to me. And so when you ask me, what is the trend? I say, cloud, or whatever. So a lot of the trends are manufactured in Silicon Valley because we all peddle products. And that's how venture capitalists invest. And so it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have the luxury to really think about, how can I make the future better? How can I make the life of somebody better, and not get associated with a trend just because you feel like you need to get associated with a trend? So I would recommend you, this is your dream time, dream of how to make the world a better place, and then come up with something. And then once you don't make money and you don't succeed, you can always come and make a cloud company or a big data company.
And so the 1,000 companies are one, the answer is yes. That's the beauty of the Valley, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there'll be tons of consolidations, and a few companies will grow, and then there are a bunch of new little companies, and then they'll consolidate. Just don't worry about it.
Okay, one final question. I think.
Gary from ThoughtWorks. Quick question for you. I recently heard the CEO of GM say, don't market self-driving cars, market intelligent vehicles. Now, a little bit earlier today, we were talking about labor. And my question to you is, what is the future of labor when you look out 15 years? What impact does automation really have? And what is the obligation of the enterprise to society?
Okay.
Like 3 books in there.
I know. So since I started this topic on this labor thing, this is not a social commentary. I think the truth is, the world is changing faster and faster, more and more automation, more and more knowledge working, and so on. So people who are with stronger education and stronger kind of knowledge are going to do well. That's the way I look at it. So I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but that's the way it's headed. So if it was my kids, I tell them, go to school, stay in school, read a lot, get knowledge one way or the other into it, because that's the future. If you talk to social commentary, we can stay here forever. But if I have to give an advice to somebody, that's where it's headed. Everybody's, we need more and more. As you automate more and more, you need to move up the value chain. And that's what is happening.
I'll just be controversial and say, corporations are a reflection society. In the same way we need cultural value norms in families, we need cultural value norms in corporations as well, and there's no real essential difference.
Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank, first of all, everybody, our amazing speakers who've given us loads of great insights. I think we'll stay around for a little while longer and just network a little bit if people want to hang around. Thank you very much.
And I also would like to thank our speakers for sharing your viewpoints so candidly. We really do appreciate that very much. And we have a small gift for you. It is the Churchill Club Speaker T-shirt. Good. Now, if you haven't done so already, please drop your contact information at the registration desk, and ThoughtWorks will send you a digital copy of the new book, Lean Enterprise. Thanks once again to ThoughtWorks. A recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel within a day or so, where you will find most of our other programs as well. And I wanted to mention a couple in light of the conversation this morning. One is in April of 2013, Colin Mayer and Kim Palese talked about the role of the corporation in society and business. I think you would find it very, very interesting. And this one's for Bask. In September of 2013, we had the Mars rover team on our stage.
Great. Have they made it to Mars?
Watch the video and find out. Anyway, you have been a terrific audience. Thank you so much. Have a great day.